Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I am your host, Jim Gramm. Alongside me is my co-host, Billy Brant. On this week's show, we're going to go over some headlines in the world of MMA, recap Bellator 145 and UFC Fight Night 77, and we will also pick the main card fights for UFC 193 this weekend on pay-per-view from Melbourne, Australia. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Gramm. Back this week. He's feeling better this week. Billy Brant, and you can follow him on Twitter at WBrant21. Follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. And how's it going today, Billy?
Good. It feels good to be back. We got a lot of good stuff to talk about.
Yes, we do. And let's start first with Bellator, the aforementioned Bellator.
The
and
what?
Bellator. If you haven't heard, Bellator's making some waves here with Bellator 145 and their fight announcements that they announced during the fight. And let's kind of start there with the announcements first before we get to actually what took place inside the cage in St. Louis, Missouri. The first announcement was the Rising New Year's Eve event, which, of course, Spike TV now owns the American rights to, headed up by one of the guys that used to run Pride, trying it again. I don't know if he was behind Dream as well, but Dream was a lot of the guys that used to run Pride as well. So this is kind of like the third attempt here of a revival.
Third time's the charm here.
Yeah.
This one will pick up.
And if you look at their logo, it's Rizin, R-I-Z-I-N, and the Z has the fist, kind of like Pride had the lightning bolt in their logo. So very similar logo. Like they probably just found the same guy. Like, hey, you're not doing anything, right? Can you design us another logo with this fist? That no one will notice. So that is their logo. Of course, headlined by Fedor. It may be this JD Singh. It may be somebody else now. I don't know. Who knows? It may change.
I think
a week before the fight. So who knows?
Fedor's ducking deep. He knows what he got into, and he's trying to switch that fight real quick.
It could be. He's who knows? So. In conjunction, there's two ladies fighting that look to weigh 180 pounds. They look bigger than King Mo. I know they were wearing heels, but those two women I felt like could have beat King Mo right there in that cage. They looked huge. I don't know. They were huge. Anyway, so that fight's happening for whatever reason.
It's happening.
It's happening. So we have that, and now King Mo is part of this one night 8-man light heavyweight tournament that they're running, and he got this big sign that said qualifier. I mean, he didn't really have to do anything.
He qualified.
He qualified
by injuring out of the last tournament,
right?
And
Yeah,
not finishing.
They're like,
it.
you know what? We want you in another tournament, King Mo. That worked out very well the last time for you guys. So let's put you right back in there.
You're clearly the best.
And
you're
even going to have to fight an additional time, not just 2 times. You'd have to fight 3 times potentially if you make it to the final. So he's there. I don't know. Babalu was in the ring, too. I thought they were about to announce Babalu was going to be in this tournament, too, who I thought retired. But maybe Babalu will be in it. I don't know who else they're... The light heavyweight division is weak as it is. I don't know where... if they're not going to get most of these guys from Bellator, I don't know where they're drawing 7 other 205-pounders and that are even near the level of King Mo, who is easily a top 20 guy.
I want to respond to that, but I mean... They're going to get nobodies, and they're planning on King Mo just running through them.
Right, and then they're having some rumored to have Sakuraba coming out of retirement to fight Shinya Aoki, which last time I checked, Sakuraba fought at like 180 pounds. Shinya Aoki's fought no more than 170, so
Listen,
I don't know what. So that's happening.
Anything that has to do with Bellator has thrown reality out of the window, and if people watch it, they're going to make it happen. I don't know what to say, man. It's a full-on, what's the word they want to use? Freak show? I don't know. But
here's the thing. This isn't really Bellator. Scott Coker has no say in what, what's this guy's name? Sakuraya? Is that his name?
He has to have a little bit. I mean, letting King Mo, they're in some sort of...
Well, they're in an agreement, but at the end of the day, Scott Coker's not saying, you got to make this match, you got to make this match. He's just, they're basically saying, hey, we would like King Mo, and he goes, okay.
Yeah.
He had the same type of deal with Dream, but he wasn't telling Dream what fights to make. Yeah. It was more or less if Dream wanted to make a fight, they would ask him if they could use this guy, and he would say yes or no. But I think
Scott Coker was like, listen, here's my blueprint. Follow this to a T, and you'll be all right. And they're like, yeah, you know what? Let's just schedule whatever we can. I do think they got a good matchup with Crone Gracie, though. I could be wrong. I think it was Crone, and I'm excited for that. The rest of it, I'm excited for, but for a different reason.
And also, there's another... I think she's like a jiu-jitsu champion, another female fighter that's supposed to be making her rising or MMA debut at Ryzen. So the name is escaping me right now, but there was some buzz about her.
Yeah, I want to pull up Crone because I thought he got matched up with, it might have been someone in relation with Yamamoto.
Yes, it's Kid Yamamoto's nephew.
Is that it?
Yeah, nephew Yamamoto is what I was referring to him as. So yeah, no, I believe that is happening as well. I remember I saw that on Reddit.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a confirmed fight, but that's just something that I saw.
And yeah, either way. Oh yeah, Azin Yamamoto added to Ryzen card. Yeah.
Oh, it's Mackenzie Dern is the female fighter that I'm speaking of. I believe she will be making her Rising debut. Let me double check if that's who it is. Yeah, I think so. And I guess she's also done some training with Alistar Overeem.
Wow, so Azin Yamamoto is a 19-year-old wrestling standout, it says. Versing Kron Gracie, a jiu-jitsu. I'm sorry, but I'm already going to pick that fight. Kron submits him in under a minute.
Well, I mean, again, unless he goes by Nephew Yamamoto, I don't see how he can win. Like, I don't know how that's not his nickname.
If it's Azin Nephew Yamamoto, I'll pick you. If you don't make that, I'm sorry, you're getting submitted.
Well, if he loses, he's going to have to seriously consider changing to. So, all right, so that was
nicknames
one.
Nicknames are important here beyond the cage.
It very is, because no one calls him his real name Noriyama. God, I probably said that wrong. See, because it's too wrong to pronounce. Everyone calls him Kid Yamamoto, even though he's almost 40 years old. He's still Kid Yamamoto. So just going by nephew would just, and that's the thing. You can be a nephew for as long as you live. The nephew's not, no age is bearing it. So
that's true. There you go.
Helping him out. All right. The other announcement that was made.
We're just here to help.
Yeah, that's all we're here. That's all we can do, actually. Kurt Angle comes out, as we already had mentioned. Kurt Angle signed something with Bellator. We're like, well, maybe he fights. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. So he comes out and says, hey, I'm going to bring out Ken Shamrock. I'm like, okay, maybe they're actually going to announce it. Maybe they were fooling us. Scott Coker, you got us. Not really, but you got us. So he comes out as like, Kurt Angle, or Ken Shamrock, you're a legend. I'd love to fight you, but I'm not going to fight you next year. And he's like, he's trying to act surprised, Ken Shamrock. And he's like, but I know who is. Bring out Hoist Gracie. Hoist Gracie comes out full gi and does the stare down with Ken Shamrock. And then he's like, oh, and by the way, Kimba Slice is fighting Data 5000. They come out and he's like, hey, what's up? And so that's what happens. Right. And then they cut to commercial. And it announces their big tentpole event for February, Houston, Texas, Shamrock, Gracie 3, and Kimbo versus Dada. And when we mentioned about weight with Aoki and Sakuraba, even at 48, Gracie's not weighing more than, 180 pounds?
Can't be.
He looks like he's in good shape. So, I mean, that's what I mean. I can't imagine weighing more than that. Shamrock's basically a heavyweight at this point. I mean, I don't even think he can get to 205. So that's a question of what weight class, how is this working? And I mean, it's Texas. I guess it's probably the only state where they don't care because they're like, we're Texas. We do what we want.
Clearly.
So they will obviously sanction this fight of a man who's 48 and a man who's 51. And Gracie hasn't fought in like 9 years, I think.
I mean, Shamrock Gracie was too old last time he came out of retirement.
Yeah.
He was done. I mean, Shamrock couldn't even finish a rear naked choke on Kimbo Slice. Right.
And the last time these two fought, they fought to a 36-minute draw.
I hope they throw rounds out the window, too.
And that was at UFC 5. Not 105 or 155. UFC 5. That was like in 1995.
First, let me say, as much as I trash this fight, I'm going to watch it. So, Bellator, you win again.
The thing that I don't like, not necessarily them actually pitting Gracie against Shamrock for a third time. It is, I will admit, it is a rubber match. People are intrigued because they're like, all right, Gracie got him the first time with superior technique. The second time, Shamrock obviously learned some jiu-jitsu, stalled it out to a draw. It would have been nice to see those two have a rubber match back in the late 90s. I guess we get it now in 2016, but it is a match that I would have been intrigued many, many years ago. Heck, even when Ken was like fighting Tito, in 2007, 2000, it would have been somewhat intriguing then. Now it's a little forced, and I don't mind the Kimbo data thing. You'll get into that. You kind of know a little bit about more than I do about that. But I would have liked, if that was going to be the fight to be the main event, I would have liked the co-main event to be a Bellator title fight and not another kind of side fight that is simply for ratings. I mean, Kimbo or Dada winning doesn't really do much for Bellator other than ratings.
Excuse me?
You know, that's what I'm saying. Because
Yeah.
they could have had Kimbo main event on his own on another separate
I thought that's
card.
what they were going to do originally.
Yeah, so honestly, we thought Kimbo Tito. I thought that was
Another
I thought
terrible
that was-
matchup that would have worked.
It is, but it fits what they're doing. Like
Exactly.
this matchup, I couldn't even fathom it. I don't know if anyone really saw this matchup.
I want to be the guy that was like, hey, Hoist, we're doing this, but you need to come out in a full gi. Like, what the? Why? Why is that necessary? Who are you trying to fool? Like, he's just in a gi all the time.
I think people think he's just in a gi all the time.
just
Like he's at
lives in
home
a gi.
chilling. He's in a gi. Like he's 48. They're like, hey, Uncle Hoist. He's like, hey, like, oh, you're still wearing the gi from last week.
Always ready to jujitsu. So be careful. If you didn't think Hoist was ready, he ain't took that gi off since UFC 5.
True. It's probably the same gi he won UFC 1 with. He probably that's probably it. Same gi. Hasn't washed it. It's good to go.
I just don't get it. Like, why did he have to come out like that?
I don't know.
I
Ken
would-
Shamrock's wearing an Affliction shirt and torn jeans.
If I was Hoist, I'd have been like, this is disrespectful. Like, why? I don't know.
So, and then the whole thing about Kurt Angle announcing it was kind of lame. And then
would've
Kurt
rather-
Angle was on the broadcast for a fight. Like I said, they're going to bring him in and he talked one fight. I don't know. I didn't enjoy that.
I would have rather Kimbo brought him out. Give me some. Why Kurt Angle?
I don't know.
It's they throw.
I have no idea why Kurt Angle's even involved in
Unless
this whole
they are
situation.
planning on doing him in the future, so maybe the winner of this fight gets.
I mean, Kurt Angle's 46 too. Like they're just bringing like old dudes that.
Yeah, but you
need
think they
money?
care at this point? Like,
I guess not. Obviously, Scott Coker doesn't care.
and as far as the Kimbo Dada fight, listen, I am excited for this fight. I can't lie. If you haven't watched it, there's a documentary called Dogfight, and it basically follows Dada's story. And he was sort of like a bodyguard for Kimbo, and then he had a couple fights, but they took his footage out and they kind of snuffed him. And then Dada ran like a backyard fight league in Miami, I believe, or something like that. So they have a lot of history, and they've been wanting to make this fight forever. All right, when I say I'm excited for this fight, it's a terrible fight. Neither of them are in shape at all or training. But I'm excited for it. Watch Dogfight and you'll understand a little more. It's actually a really good documentary, though, all that aside.
All right, we got an interesting thing because, of course, Bellator was on Friday, UFC was on Saturday. I want to bring this up before we get to the fights too. Bellator 145 averaged 814,000 viewers, drawing its peak audience during the Bobby Lashley fight. And
wait. During the Bobby Lashley fight?
believe it or not,
feel
and the
sad for-
ratings were slightly higher than the UFC fight the next day, just by a little bit. And in fact, the ratings for this event were higher than even the Dynamite card that happened just 2 months ago as well. So this is one of the, looking at some of their other temple events, Bellator 133 and Bellator 138, it actually did slightly worse than 134 at 872. And that Bellator 138, which was a monster there, 1.5 million. That was Liam McGarry and Emmanuel Newton, and that also had Kimbo against Shamrock. So not the worst event, pretty good, and obviously it did.
Did you say more than the Dynamite card?
Yeah, it did more than the Dynamite card as well. And I think they had something to do with it being on Friday night, not going up against college football. Then whereas the Dynamite they ended up putting on a Saturday. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why the UFC card a little less in the ratings as well.
As a fight fan, I'm happy that this one was a ton, but I'm disappointed because that Dynamite card had so much. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that should have been so huge, but I'm just glad they're getting good ratings. Both of them in general. Bellator's doing something right. I mean, they're getting the ratings.
And again, this was an event not headlined by somebody like a Kimbo or a Shamrock or a Gracie. This was two of their big stars. I think Will Brooks is a star. People may not look at him that way, but the dude is an incredible talent, and they are very lucky to still have him under contract.
Yeah,
because he's a guy I think can instantly compete in the UFC. He's a very well-rounded fighter, and we'll talk about the fight in a minute. And obviously, they got a host of guys at 145 that I easily think could compete in the UFC. Like, no joke.
That has to be their best division.
Is by far their best division. They got so many stars, and most of them are young. Most of them are under 30. These are not like guys who were washed up from the UFC that are now coming to Bellator. These are all guys that they kind of groomed. So it is nice to see kind of that take place and get the big ratings off of that.
Yeah, and one day they'll be fighting a heavyweight that's 70 years old because Bellator.
Right. So let's look at the actual fights, though, that took place. The first fight of the night, Justin Lawrence against Emmanuel Sanchez. Solid fight. I thought Emmanuel Sanchez, again, a guy that had a really good fight in the El Paso card, if I think I said that right. He had that win over Corrales, then takes on Justin Lawrence. Wins. I thought Justin Lawrence, I think one of the reasons he lost is because he was the guy backing up. He was the guy out on the outside. Emmanuel Sanchez took control of the center of the cage. He was the one kind of chasing after Lawrence. I thought Lawrence did a good job of countering, maybe land a little bit of the heavier strike, but I think that constant looking like Sanchez was stalking Lawrence, I think that really played with the judges' heads, and I think that's why he got that split decision win, even though a close fight. I mean, Lawrence can't be too disappointed when he goes back and watches the tape how close this fight this would. I did think Justin Lawrence won, but I see why the judges did go with Sanchez.
Yeah, that sways the judges' minds a lot, and you see it a lot of the time that gets weighed heavy. But man, for Justin Lawrence, I'm kind of really disappointed. When this kid was on the was it Ultimate Fighter, right? And he trained at Black House. He was from, I think.
He trained with his dad a lot too. I think
I
now
he's from Black House.
Now he's with the guys at Power MMA with Johnny Case, Miles Jury, Michael Chandler's now with them. He was part of that group of guys that went out there.
I remember seeing him on that show and being like, man, this kid has a real future in like the UFC, and to see him not bash Bellator or anything, but struggle in these fights, it's tough, man. But like you said, for him, probably could have been a win, but it sways the judges.
He needed a little more output.
Yeah,
I think that he was waiting too much to counter instead of attacking. And I think that's probably the biggest adjustment from this fight to his next fight. Because I think if he would have got by Sanchez, you could make a case that he gets a shot at the title. I think, but with the loss, Sanchez now puts himself in a very favorable position. I think if Sanchez can get one more quality win, he could be fighting for the 145 title very quickly.
Yeah, for him, it's perfect. And for Lawrence, or really for anyone that has that super counter-strike style, like watch Leota's fights. If you don't get that big knockout, you might lose a decision, even though you didn't really take too much damage or anything. So you just need more output with it.
Now, the aforementioned Bobby Lashley fought longtime veteran of the sport, James Thompson. And we were kind of down on Lashley saying, he's boring. Yeah, he gets the knockout eventually, but he took it to Thompson early and just got out of there with the finish 54 seconds into the first round. Just took him down quickly and just started unloading on him. And that's what we needed to see from Bobby Lashley, not just simply controlling guys, landing a little pitter-patter, kind of wearing him down 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, then maybe getting a mercy knockout. No, he laid it to James Thompson. I think in the process, that might be James Thompson's last fight. He did not look very good, but Bobby Lashley at least looked like a guy that you can go, all right, this guy can be exciting to watch. He's worthwhile putting on these cards.
Yeah, Bobby Lashley, really, he listened to our show. He was real disappointed with the criticism, and he went out there and did what he had to do. This is all we can ask from him. I'm kind of surprised with Bobby Lashley, though, that they're actually they seem to be building him up with real fights rather than just throwing him into some ridiculous stuff. So I kind of like that on one end, but he seems to get better. And he was exciting this time. He went out there, got the job done quick. So good on Bobby Lashley. And this is weird to say, but I'm excited to see him next time.
If he can do that in his next fight, then yeah, keep him coming. We'll see what happens because Bellator, their heavyweight champion Minkonoff, I don't no idea where he is. I don't know if he lost his visa or what. But to me, basically, they really don't have much of a heavyweight.
I forgot they had a
division.
heavyweight division.
You forget. That's what I mean. So that's what I mean. I don't know if they just make him champion or what.
Make Czech Congo champion or Kimbo. Who cares?
The next fight of the evening, Michael Chandler against David Rickles. Michael Chandler looked good. And David Rickles.
I really like Rickles too.
I do, but he didn't follow. If you watched last week's show, I told him he's got to stay on the outside. He's got to stay moving. He can't let Michael Chandler come walking in with looping punches to set up a takedown or get the power shots. And he didn't really, and all that, he didn't have a lot of head movement. He didn't do enough defensively to counteract Michael Chandler, who was in his face with the power shots, which led to takedowns, which led to nasty ground and pound. He wasn't doing threaten him with submissions or anything. He wasn't doing enough to get back up on his feet. And David Chandler just put it right to David Rickles. I did say it would last longer than the first one, which it did probably by 6 or 7 minutes. But once again, Michael Chandler, I think now that he's at Power MMA, I think he's maybe getting back to his roots a little bit. I think his conditioning will improve. I think Aaron Simpson is a guy that was really good, and with his conditioning when he was in the UFC, he's one of the head coaches there, and I think he's the perfect guy to help Michael Chandler out, because that to me was his problem. Now again, this fight only went about 8 minutes, but he looked good for those 8 minutes. It wasn't like he had a good first round, then he looked tired and somehow landed a desperation shot against David Rickles. I mean, he put the damage to him, and David Rickles was a bloody mess when that fight was over.
Yeah, I was pretty sad. Like I said, I like Rickles. I mean, the dude comes out to Action Bronson the one time, and for Michael Chandler, I mean, there's not much more you can ask from him. Yeah, again, he looked really good, looked strong. It's more just what's next for him, because this is a dominant win.
Yeah, I mean, he's already lost to Will Brooks twice.
So that's tough.
I don't know if a trilogy fight is in the books. The first one was excellent. The second one, a good performance by Brooks, but not necessarily a great fight. So I wonder how much that will happen. And again, Michael Chandler's a guy that I think, compete in the UFC too.
100%.
So it could be something where he may not want to fight for the belt, get out of his Bellator contract, get a couple of impressive wins, and then move on to the UFC. And I think the UFC would be hard-pressed to not sign a guy like Michael Chandler.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, like, Brooks has his number there. But, I mean, this guy's good, and he could compete in the UFC, and I wouldn't mind seeing both.
And he's exciting too.
Yeah, 100%.
That's Dana White looks for exciting guys, and you can't find him probably more exciting guy than Michael Chandler.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more you can say, because he's kind of stuck here in Bellator in a weird spot to get that third fight. And the UFC, he would do great, and he would be exciting.
The co-main event for the 155 title, the aforementioned Will Brooks put his title on the line, this time against Poland's Marcin Held. And Will Brooks, much to his credit, he went into the Shark Tank. He went into the Lion's Den. He went into danger inside the guard of Marcin Held, one of the most dangerous submission guys Bellator has on their whole entire roster. And not only did he come out unscathed, he dominated Marcin Held, with the exception of that first round where I think Held got him with some good control, close on a couple submissions. It was all Will Brooks. And it's incredible to me that Will Brooks, instead of just outstriking him, which he could have done, I thought, fairly easy in this fight, staying on the outside, coming in, coming out, which again, I thought he could do. He's like, you know what? I'm going to go right after Marcin Held. I'm going to go after his strength and see if he can beat me. And if I lose, I lose. But I know I lose, trying to one up the other guy. And it worked. He was able to do it. I mean, he came close a couple times to getting caught in those first 3 rounds, but by the time the 4th round hit, you could tell just he was wearing on Held, and Held could just not keep up. And this maybe reaffirms what I've been saying for several years. Held should probably be at 145 pounds. Just seeing him against Will Brooks and, trying to carry that weight and trying to outmuscle the guy for submission, it just, by a certain point, you just tell it just wasn't going to happen against Will Brooks, who I think is a pretty big 155-pound dude. And I think for Held, he's still a young guy. I believe he's only 24, 25 years old, but I think 145, he's going to have to look to move down the 10 pounds, because I'm not sure if he can. Some of these elite guys, even in Bellator, the technique's great and all, but sometimes you got to add a little muscle to it, and he wasn't going to outmuscle Will Brooks.
Yeah, 100% for him. That's good. And this is another one where, pointless to break down. Like you said, Will Brooks took it to him. He wore on him. But where do you go from here? Look how many wins in a row he's got. He's beaten all the top guys. Like, it's almost like you have to make that move. I mean, how many Bellator wins in a row? That's all Bellator.
He's 8 Bellator wins in a row, including 3 straight title defenses.
It's like you got to – I don't know how many Askren had before he moved on, but, like, after a time of dominating, you have to go to the UFC.
And here's the, same much similar to Askren, only 2 of these wins in the streak are by knockout.
That is just like that.
All the rest are decisions.
Yeah.
So that's another thing too. And Will Brooks has obviously been very vocal about his lack of promotion by Bellator. So he's a guy that may look to leave anyways. And again, a guy that I think can easily compete with the best of the UFC.
Yeah,
He's a well-rounded guy. He's training with some of the best at American Top Team, so he's no stranger to training with guys that are UFC talent. I mean, if you ask Dustin Poirier, probably one of his main training partners, also at 155, if you ask Dustin, you think this guy can compete with you and the other guys at 155? I guarantee you would say 100% yes. There's no way.
There's no question about it. So I wouldn't be surprised if that move came soon. I don't know how. You never know how Bellator contracts are, but I mean, I want to see the UFC get more of these guys only because of the excitement. Like, I think a lot of these guys could compete.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, when you say compete, like, a lot of people are like, yeah, they'd show up, but like, these are like top 10 guys, I feel, for sure.
The main event of the evening, Daniel Strauss against Patricio Pitbull. Patricio's his brother. I always get those two confused. I think they're both named Patricio, just one goes by Patricio to be different. They're like the Nogueira brothers. Right. They're both Antonio Nogueira. Daniel Strauss against Pitbull for the third time, I believe, but the second with a title on the line. They originally first fought all the way back at Bellator 45 with Pitbull getting a victory. And then, of course, they thought just earlier this year in January where Pitbull was able to win by rear naked choke. They fight for the third time. Strauss able to get the victory this time in another close fight, another fight in which Daniel Strauss dominated early, and then towards the end, it looked like it was almost going to be a repeat where he was going to do a mistake. He shot in for that takedown. Pitbull reversed it. He was on his back. It looked like it was going to be a submission. He somehow held out to get the victory. I think he easily won the first 3 rounds of the fight. You can make a case Pitbull stormed back to win the last 2. By that point, I think Strauss had already won it. And once again, I think it's the speed and accuracy and also the power that Daniel Strauss brought to the table. His left hand, he said he had broken it in the first round, but he threw that thing, even when you could tell, even when he wasn't clenching his fist, like in the last round or 2, he was still throwing to the right. He landed a couple of very nice straight lefts. In fact, he floored Pitbull that one time. It looked like he was going to finish him. I believe that was in the second round, I think. And pretty much, like I said, he just had to do what he did in the last fight, just not shoot in for a bad takedown. And I thought, oh no, he's not going to do it again. And he held out. And he was even joking about it in the post fight with Jimmy Smith. He's like, yeah, he goes, I just wanted to mess with everybody. He's like, no. He's like, I didn't want to do that. But I was like, you better not say mess with him. He's beat you last time. You don't play around with that. But he gets the win. He holds on and he becomes the Bellator featherweight champion for the second time.
Yeah, it's good on him. And like, yeah, Pitbull's one of those guys, or Patricio. It's like, you can't have one little mistake because he's always there and he's always ready to capitalize. So he did what he had to do, almost does, but he gets through it. And I mean, there's not much more you can ask for. It's an exciting trilogy there.
And probably because this is the first win by Strauss, you can easily make a fourth fight between these two. And for Pitbull in this fight, much like his last one, he wasn't dealing. I don't know if it's the southpaw that bothers him. I don't know if it's the speed and power. I'm not sure what it is, but he seems more defensive than when he fought a guy like Pat Kern, who's more about output and footwork. And he seemed to match Kern like perfectly, especially in that second fight, even beating him to the punch in a lot of cases. But against Daniel Strauss, I don't know. It's like a different. He's in a different level, and he doesn't do kind of those things that got him to the championship. In both fights, really, he just seems not the same. So I don't know what it. I don't know what it is that Daniel Strauss is doing specifically tactically to kind of affect Pitbull like that, but he doesn't seem like the same guy that fought Pat Kern twice, or even Henry, or even Daniel Weichel, or some of the other guys he's fought in his career. He seems just slightly off in these 2 fights he's had with Daniel Strauss here this year.
That's actually a really good point that I didn't put too much thought in, but I don't know what it could be. I don't know, but that's interesting.
Yeah, he's just if you watch these 2 fights and then watch his 2 fights with Pat Kern, I feel like he's a completely different guy. And those are the other 2 top guys of the division. So I think it's just simply a small adjustment for him, but something he's going to have to make, because otherwise if he fights him for a 4th time, Daniel Strauss probably going to beat him.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think like you said, we will see that fight now.
And just, again, what heart shown, with the broken hand. And the one thing I will say about Daniel Strauss, the new play-by-play guy, I forget his name because it's not Sean Wheelock anymore, but he was bringing up like, he has that knock of like, losing when it's down. And I remember Jimmy Smith at one point was like, he did already win the Bellator featherweight championship. He's not a complete choker. Like he was the champion. And I was like, I almost forgot, because the way the play-by-play guy was bringing it up, I was like, yeah, he is a choker. But then when Jimmy Smith, I was like, oh yeah, duh, he didn't win the champion. So he wasn't like a complete failure. He wasn't the Buffalo Bills or something. He had the ring, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's really hard to lose a belt and come back and get that back. So I mean, that's another big thing. Not many guys can do that, especially nowadays in any organization.
Let's get to a couple of UFC headlines before we get to Fight Night 77. Mirko Cro Cop was set to take on Anthony Hamilton at UFC Fight Night Seoul, Korea, UFC Fight Night 79. Unfortunately, he got hurt with his shoulder during the fight, and instead of just delaying the fight against Hamilton or fighting someone else in 2016, he has decided that through all these different ways to repair the injury, in an article by Sheerdog I'm getting here, including daily therapy, injections of blood plasma, and various cocktails of drugs. None of them seemed to work out, and he felt that with that and moving forward, trying to heal the shoulder, that it just wasn't going to work out. He's already 41 years old. This fight would have been his 80th professional between kickboxing and mixed martial arts, and he decided that it was time. I mean, he came back and avenged what he called the worst loss of his career against Gabriel Gonzaga. So in his mind, he was able to kind of go out on top. It was intriguing to us, Billy, that he even took the fight against Hamilton in the first place. Not a guy he had lost to or fought previously, not a huge name in the heavyweight division. So I understand it, but it would have been nice to him go out fighting, or he would have announced it actually after the Gonzaga fight. So I think it was maybe coming maybe after the Hamilton fight, but the injury just kind of maybe speeded it up a little bit.
Yeah, like we talked about, I really didn't like the Hamilton fight for him anyway. It sucks we don't get to see him again. I love Cro Cop. I'd love to see him again, but at the same time, he's 41. He has had so many fights that I don't know if you're going to get a better way to go out than with getting the revenge on Gonzaga in such a crazy way he did it. And yeah, I don't know. I'm happy he got that sweet revenge. He had a great career. It's a shame he had to go out on an injury note and kind of just post a Facebook retirement where everyone's like, what? Is he retired or not? But Cro Cop's a legend. He'll go down Hall of Famer no matter what.
Definitely, I think the UFC puts him in the Hall of Fame maybe as the pioneer section of the Hall of Fame, because obviously by the time he got to the UFC, you can make the case that maybe he was past his prime a little bit. But
when you look at those handful of guys, Cro Cop,
his pride accomplishments are incredible, especially winning that open weight Grand Prix like he did. Came very close to winning the championship a couple times. I mean, he had Nogueira and Fedor rocked many a times. And he had some other epic wars. I think he fought Vanderlei Silva as well. Just he's fought a who's who of fighters in his time, and was a guy that really was, to me, the first straight up kickboxer to have success in mixed martial arts. And he's kind of paved the way for a lot of other guys who have done the same thing. But his left head kick, I think, will be stuff of legend, and I think will be always remembered.
No one will ever forget that head kick ever. And I mean, that's why you put him down, like you said, one of those pioneer guys. And, you know, good on Cro Cop, man. Look at this. Would have been his 80th professional fight. So that's so much. And he's had, like you said, not only has he been fighting for that long, but he's been fighting the top. Like, no matter who, the best names you can name, legends, everything, that's who Cro Cop's been fighting. So immediate Hall of Fame, great career for Cro Cop.
Also, on a quick side note, he could have retired because Reebok wouldn't let him wear the Croatian checkered flag shorts.
See, that's what gets me mad, though. Like, I would be a little more cool with Reebok if they still allowed stuff like that. Like, why not let these fighters...
That's really why he retired. He actually didn't hurt his shoulder at all.
Just a big you to Reebok.
All right, speaking of injuries, we got a guy coming back from injury here.
I want to say one more thing,
All
too.
Right.
Vitor's wife, did you see what she said or something? She said because of the Reebok deal, he was losing millions of dollars and is basically fighting for just basically hobby, which is kind of ridiculous.
Millions of dollars? I don't know about millions of dollars.
I think the word she used was millions.
Well, maybe million Brazilian dollars. You know, I mean, they were talking about exchange rate. It's probably not that much, but in Brazil, it's probably a lot.
It may be, but I seen that, and she said he's basically fighting for like hobby or something, and I'm like,
I don't think so.
Come on, it's Vitor.
His base contract is over 6 figures.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I seen it and I was
And
like,
you know
come
he's
on.
still doing commercials in Brazil and stuff like that. He's not losing millions of dollars. Like
Yeah,
no way.
I'm on her side. I don't like the Reebok.
I'm not saying
deal.
he's not losing money.
Yeah,
but millions of dollars. You're telling me just because he can't wear Gillette sponsored or a Boina Koi or whatever, he can't do a TV commercial in Brazil about that or something? Like
the exact quote: Vitor losing millions because of Reebok, and it's fighting basically as a hobby. Come on,
I don't think so.
If you call 6-figure plus fight nights a hobby,
yeah.
Okay. But anyway, I'm sorry. Also, you know what? I'm sorry. Top trending fighters: Dafir Harris, Dada 5000.
This is unsure.
Is this real? I can't believe this is real. What year is it?
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, so again, speaking of guys coming back from injury, we talked about this guy on our 30 under 30 list. He didn't make the list because he was inactive, but a guy I'm really excited to see jump back into the cage, and that's former #1 contender in the bantamweight division, Michael McDonald, will come back after nearly 2 years as he will take on Masanori Kanehara, and he will fight on the undercard of UFC 195. And he has not fought since I believe it was I think his last fight was against Uriah Faber. And that was in December of 2013. So he has not fought since then. He's a guy that, you know, when he fought for the title was, I believe, only 23 years old, one of the youngest guys to even just fight for a title. And he's a guy that, even with the 2 years off, I still think he can recover. But it's just nice to see him battle back because he's a guy that a lot of people, I think, just forgot about. A lot of the bantamweight division had kind of passed him by, so we'll see if he can get back into the swing of things here starting at UFC 195.
Yeah, I'm super excited and happy to see him back because he was one of these weird cases where he had a lot of success, was really exciting, and he was so young, so he takes his injury and takes time off, but because he's so young, he can still come back from it. It might have even been good for him. He could have a real good career from this point on. I mean, when you've already fought for the title, been out for 2 years, and you're only, 25, 26?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to see him back, and I can't wait to see him fight.
UFC Fight Night 77, Sao Paulo, Brazil. 6 fights were on the main card. Real quickly, we got to shout out to our friend Johnny Case, victorious once again, this time in Brazil, taking out Jan Cabral by unanimous decision. I thought a pretty good performance by Johnny, to kind of paralleling from the Will Brooks. He went into the Lion's Den a little bit. The great jiu-jitsu guard of Jan Cabral came out unscathed. I thought landed some pretty good striking combinations, even had some control on top of his own, and really, I thought battered Jan Cabral. Jan Cabral looked pretty messed up after this fight. So good performance by Johnny Case. Looked like he suffered a little bit of a foot injury, I believe, in the fight, so making him a little longer than usual, but Johnny was his usual self and was, very positive. I thought was able to explain his performance well, and even called out Sage Northcutt after the fight, which was great because I'm sure he knew his name, but the way he called him out was saying, "Yeah, I'll take on that Saved by the Bell guy." And John Aiken's like, "You mean Sage Northcutt?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, that guy." And you could see his coaches, Aaron Simpson and his other coach, just bust out laughing because they knew he meant Sage Northcutt. He just didn't want to say his name. Yeah. So I give Johnny all credit. I think him against Sage would be an excellent matchup.
Yeah, 100%. And Case looks good. That's a good fight for Sage. And I don't know why it just reminded me of the Rampage Bobby O. saying that 10 times, but it is funny and a good way to call him out. And I mean, everyone's going to want a piece of Sage. You've seen it with Conor when he first started blowing up, and you're going to see it now with Sage Northcutt, where a lot of these guys are going to be saying his name, so he needs to get used to that.
And we'll try to get Johnny back on the show. I'm trying to work out my schedule and get that rocking and rolling for everybody. But getting to the main card, starting first at 205 pounds, Corey Anderson against Fabio Maldonado.
Oh, yeah, speaking of Fabio Maldonado.
As we expected, just absolute domination here by Corey Anderson, doing what he does best, wrestling, not allowing Maldonado to turn this thing into a brawl. And he was definitely beast in 25A as he outstruck Maldonado 97-49. If you actually look at the takedown numbers, pretty decent takedown defense by Maldonado overall, stopping the majority of the takedowns, but still got taken down 6 times in this fight. And it really hit home, I believe, in the last round where he was landed those 2 takedowns to really dominate him. So, or I'm sorry, not in the, yeah, he landed 2 out of 5 in the 3rd round to really seal that deal. And Anderson, I mean, he has to get someone better now. This is 2 straight very dominant victories in a row, but I'm not really sure who to match him up against next. A guy I think may be likely, but I think it may be too quick would be Glover, just because they're both kind of on win streaks. But I don't know if that's. I don't think that would be next. Glover to me would match up better with Alexander Gustafsson next, and a match that could happen maybe be Rashad Evans, but I don't know where Evans' career will be after the lot. So he's in a tough. I think he's in a tough place where he's in the top 15. I just don't know who to match him up against next because he's clearly dominating all these other guys below the top 15.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I think some of those guys you named are just a bit too high. Another problem he's going to run into is as dominant as he is, he's not the most exciting, so I'm not sure they'll boost him up to a fight like that yet. Because honestly, I feel he's going to run into trouble with those guys. If you look at a guy like Glover, if you think Fabio could stuff that many, look what Glover did to Pat Cummins. And you're going to see a lot of the same thing. So I think he could take a few more fights around that, the really back end of the top 10. I think maybe Rashad would be good at this point because I think Glover and Gustafsson would probably be the better matchup right there instead of, I think they were talking about Rashad Gustafsson. Rashad maybe, but other than that, yeah, it's tough to match him up right now.
Looking at the next fight of the evening, it was in the lightweight division as Rashid Magomedov took on Gilbert Burns. Magomedov off for about a year. Looked pretty good. I would have liked to seen a little more output from Magomedov. He did outstrike him 94-26. I just thought that was a case of just being very accurate and really countering what Gilbert Burns was doing, more so than really landing a lot of. Though he did land a good amount of punches there in the second round when he rocked him. I think that's where he accumulated a lot of the strikes, with Gilbert Burns not offering much resistance. But I felt that's a situation there, even though he played it safe and Stan was, I think, looking saying, he laid off him. He's good. He didn't, overexert himself there. But I think that's a case there that other guys in this division would have finished. And as much as I do applaud him for kind of not rushing into things against the guy that Burns, who we have seen come back from fights, I just feel you look at even some of the other 55ers on this card, like a Kevin Souza or Alex Oliveira on this card, I just felt like they would have got the finish there and wouldn't have even let it go another, 7-8 minutes.
Yeah,
and that's maybe the only knock I could see.
Yeah, and it's exactly like what you're saying. Like in this division, really in the UFC, you can get these little wins and get by, but you just got to have that killer instinct and really go for that finish if you want to just make the big leaps forward and really go forward. So great fight for him, but I'd like to see more. I just love when you got to look for that finish, man.
And for Gilbert Burns, guy that definitely was hype coming into the fight too. Obviously got to work on his footwork a little more, maybe his conditioning a little bit, because, like I said, the second round really was his downfall, getting rocked with that big shot. I mean, that's where he got outstruck 43-9. If you look at the other 2 rounds, sure, outstruck, but not by a gaping margin. So that'll one thing he'll have to work on there. I mean, he had the takedowns early, but, after that, he didn't Rashid, I think, kind of figured out what was going on, was able to stay on the outside, and for the most part just played it safe to a victory.
Yeah, I mean, like you get by, but it's like I don't even thinking back now, it's not a fight I'm gonna look back and say, oh yeah, this guy, you just got to be making them statements nowadays.
Now here's the guy I was talking about, Alex Oliveira against Peter Hallman here. Good fight by, I think, both guys. I think actually Oliveira came out pretty good, landed some damage, and then I thought Hallman really answered well in the second round. He got the takedown, controlled him, landed some good damage. I thought it was 1-1 heading into the third, but then kind of the power punches there by Oliveira, and he was able to couple that in with a just excellent knockout. If you haven't seen it, I think I have it on my Twitter. I got a GIF of it, and just an excellent knockout. And that to me was the difference of this fight. I didn't think Hallman couldn't do that. He had to do what he did in the second round, grind on him, maybe get a submission. But Oliver is the type of guy that can finish just like that, and that's what he did. And I don't know, he didn't necessarily need it, but it avoided any conflict of that going to the judges there.
Yeah, I really like Oliveira. I mean, the whole time he's out there, he's bouncing around. He looks like he's having fun. I mean, good fight by him. Not to count Hallman out, like you said, he's had a good second. He wins, but then Oliveira really just did not want that to do with the judges. And he hit it with a nasty knockout, and I really like him, man. I'm really excited to see him next. He's a real exciting fighter. He's Brazilian cowboy. He has a shark tattooed on his chest, I think, which I I'm a fan.
And he's a big dude at 155.
Yeah, he is big.
He's a big dude, and that's going to present problems for a lot of people. And like I said, and it looked like he was pretty well in shape. We didn't see the full third round, but it looked like he was going. I think that was one of the reasons that plagued him in the Gilbert Burns fight. I think he kind of ran out of steam a little bit, and that allowed Gilbert Burns to kind of come back and get that takedown. And I think that was in the back of his head a little bit, that I can't do what happened in the last fight. I gotta do something, and he got it, and he got himself a nice little bonus for the performance of the night.
It's a highlight reel finish too, which never hurts you.
Next fight of the evening. Now the first three fights were pretty solid. Anderson, I thought landed damage. It was a little better than his Blachowicz. We had Rashid safe, but there was an exciting moment there in the second. Then of course we had Oliveira kick off, and then to me, the next three fights all were incredible. Thomas Almeida against Anthony Burchak. I said it was going to be good. I said you still got to watch out for Burchak. I thought Burchak, you actually look at the striking numbers, I thought Burchak was actually holding his own. He was landing nice shots too, but then Thomas Almeida got him hurt up against the cage. And again, we talk about killer instinct. He didn't let Anthony Burchak have a chance to come back into this fight, and he ended it in the first round here with some great punches, a spinning attack that kind of led to it with a kick as well. Just took Anthony Burchak out, a guy that, again, he didn't want to mess with, because he's a guy that I think could have very easily with one punch could have done the same thing to Almeida, but I'm able to get another victory, another performance of the night, and now I think is one fight away from a title shot. I think that this is Anthony Burchak. I think his win over Joe Soto, I think, is a very quality win. It's back-to-back awesome wins for Almeida now over Pickett and Burchak, and I think he's poised to maybe take on somebody like a Brian Caraway, perhaps the Eduardo Sterling winner. Coming up.
Brian who?
I know it's not, but I think they're going to give him another fight. I don't think he sits out for the winner of Dillashaw and
Caraway's never going to take this fight.
You don't think Caraway would?
No, Caraway ain't taking no fight, let alone Almeida. Almeida's something special, man.
Or I'm also forgetting if Rafael Sunciao
that
comes back. That would be
good.
That would be my other option. Again, he's hurt, so he's been out of sight, out of mind.
Either way, though, this he's the future. The power he has, and not only want to say when people rock guys and they flurry. But look how accurate he was with each strike as he was rocked, and he just finished him off perfect. I mean, he's 21-0, and how many are by finish? I think 20 of them.
Yeah, and both his last two fights he faced probably a little more adversity in the Pickett fight, but still faced guys that were close and had shots against him. It wasn't just simply him running over to the other side of Cage and just throwing 100 strikes and winning.
Yeah.
He got tagged as well.
And he's been fighting top guys, like those guys you named, all great fighters, and I think. Were they all knockouts in a row, all first round?
The only one, and we actually got to interview him, was Tim Gorman. The only guy that's gone 3 rounds with this guy. His very first UFC fight. And I think you got to admit you got to look at, Tim Gorman is a pretty tough guy. Now looking back at it, that he was able to go 15 minutes with him.
But yeah, other than that, I mean, there's nothing I can say about Almeida that's bad. I mean, this dude is vicious. He can finish you. No, clearly, obviously, he gets all finishes. And, man, he's just exciting. And I really hope he fights for that title. Him versus Dillashaw would be a great fight.
Again, like I said, I wouldn't be – I just think that they might give him one more.
Yeah.
I that's kind of my thinking.
100%. I don't know who it could be now that – I mean – yeah, I don't know who it would be right now. I don't think
Sunciao to me would be the perfect one, because you want to give Sunciao a fight coming back because of the injury thing. So if they can materialize that February, March, it lines up perfect for possibly UFC 200 or maybe a little after, a little before, with Dillashaw taking on Cruz winner taking on that winner.
As much as I'd like to see him versus the Funk Master or something on there, I don't know if that'll quite be enough. You need a name like a Sunciao or something, or a Caraway, if Caraway shows up, takes that fight.
Co-main event of the evening, light heavyweight division, Glover Teixeira against Patrick Cummings. We ended up kind of going different picks in this one. We knew it would be close, an exciting fight. Patrick Cummings is a guy that does a lot of damage with his takedowns when he takes the guy down in his ground and pound, I should say. But in this fight, wasn't able to hold Glover down enough to really land that sustained ground and pound. And when it was on the feet, we knew Glover Teixeira would have the advantage, and Cummins was doing nothing defensively to get out of the way of these shots of Glover Teixeira. And eventually the shots outweighed the takedowns there of Patrick Cummings. And that towards the end of the first round, he was getting rocked. In the second round, it just continued for Glover Teixeira as he just landed an onslaught, outstriking him 25-3 en route to the stoppage there by Herb Dean in the second round at the 121 marker. And again, I think this was a case of Cummings just not having enough striking offensively or defensively to counteract when he doesn't get the fight to the ground. And this is the thing, he's already in his mid-30s in his career. I don't think he's going to change much, but that's one of the reasons why he hasn't been able to get into that elite level, because if one thing doesn't go his way, he doesn't have a backup plan, and it showed here in this fight here against Glover Teixeira.
Clearly there was just a difference in worlds of striking right here in this fight. And I do want to say it's kind of a credit to Pat Cummings, but I think his own style is partially why he loses this fight, because I think there's a lot of times where Pat Cummings could get him down, and he probably could have sat in half guard and held it there for a lot longer, but he tries to do more damage and he tries to advance position, and that allows Glover to make the space and get up because he's really good in his own right with grappling. So I think Pat Cummings he has every chance to play it boring and stall out and hold more, but he doesn't, and it kind of plays to his own death, so to say, in this fight, because that gives Glover the space to get up. And then when you're striking with Glover, Cummings is not even in the same world, really.
Now, we kind of already mentioned Glover, possibly a matchup that was supposed to happen earlier this year against Alex. That's what's next for him, and I think that's a great fight, because if Glover wins, you can make a case, all right, Glover gets another shot at the title, and if Gustafsson wins, you can make a shot, he gets the shot at the title. So I think it kind of works out for both guys there.
Yeah, Gustafsson, I was starting to think it was over for him because he took every champ to the limit and just didn't quite get it. But his fight with Jones was so good. Now you got Jones back. Say Jones beats DC. That's 2 losses for DC. Gustafsson's the best winner there. Who doesn't want to see that rematch? So he's right back in it. Same with Glover.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, that's, I think, the perfect matchup. The winner takes on, assuming Gus and DC and Jones are going to be the first matchup booked. Who cares about Ryan Bader? I don't want to see him fight anyone.
Right, and that could, it also throws a wrench whether or not how good the fight between Bader and Rumble Johnson is coming up too. You kind of have a case of maybe who did it better.
I forget about that too, only because even though Rumble comes off that loss to DC, him versus Jones, stylistically, I really want to see that fight still. And that's a fresh matchup.
Right, and again, this is all on the pretense of the DC's next title defense happening relatively soon. Because if it doesn't, then it may force a situation where you have the winner of Rumble and Bader take on the winner of a proposed Gustafsson and Glover.
Yeah,
matchup.
If you look at that too, honestly, I'm giving away picks for way in the future. I think Rumble's going to destroy Bader. If you look at Bader's last fight versus Rashad, it looked like you were watching a fight from like 2005. And I don't know. I think
They also got to factor in Rashad trains with Rumble Johnson.
Yeah.
He's going to give him a lot of insight as to what to do differently.
Yeah, so I don't know. This division's kind of in a weird spot with Jones coming back and everything, but it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, that's for sure.
Main event of the evening for the third time, Vitor Belfort against Dan Henderson, this time in the middleweight division. And a little different Vitor, a little more composed, just kind of waiting, reacting, and then just head kick, and that was it. One strike from this guy is sometimes all he needs, and that was the case on Saturday night in Sao Paulo, Brazil, as he once again knocks out Dan Henderson to win the rubber match 2-1. And Vitor, maybe he should have done that against Chris Weidman instead of rushing in. Maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. Maybe it would have, but maybe training with Greg Jackson got him back to maybe being a little more calm instead of just blitzing people early. I'm not sure, but again, when you only need one strike, there may be no sense to throw the volume like that and wear yourself out, and maybe that's all it took. And once again, that's the result with Dan Henderson being knocked out on the canvas.
Yeah, the one thing about Vitor, either way, rushing or not, though, the guy's accuracy, he's a sniper. I mean, look at the Rockhold fight, how clean that was. Really, both Henderson fights, the Bisping fight, man. When he fires that head kick, he's throwing it on and on target and quick. So there's not many guys that can defend that. I think the problem with the Weidman fight was he didn't spam head kick. His B button was stuck and he started using his hands, and he got tired and Weidman took him down. Vitor, you go in there and you spam head kick against anyone and you win. And I'm really sad about this, actually, though, because on a real note, Henderson's an all-time great, one of my favorites. So it sucks to see him go down like that where it's like the first strike thrown, but I hope we see one more good fight out of him.
Well, let's move on here to UFC 193, the huge stadium show at Etihad Stadium in Melbourne, Australia, coming this Saturday on pay-per-view, I guess Sunday if you're actually in Australia. A very stacked main card. Just the main fight, I guess I would highlight on the undercard I'm probably looking forward to. Gian Villante is a guy that always seems to bring it and always seems to be an exciting fight, win or lose. So very interested to see him take on a longtime veteran of the sport there in Anthony Proch. I'm excited for that one. And also, I think under the radar fight, Kyle Noke against Peter Sabata, I think is a very intriguing matchup to be. Noke is a guy that, he had some injuries, then he moved to 170. He did the Ultimate Fighter thing. He had that good close fight against Kote. I think he's a solid guy. And Sabata is a guy that I think this is his second run in the UFC. And he's a guy that's trying to look, to get closer to the top 15. Obviously, taking on a guy in Kyle Noke, beating him in his home country of Australia would be a move in that right direction.
Yeah, I mean, this card is really stacked from the ground up. Both those fights you talked about, I mean, there's a lot of good fights on this card. So, man, I'm excited.
Let's get to this main card, though. It starts off first, and we're actually going to have this guy for an interview. We'll be out later today. Couldn't get him earlier to have him on the broadcast here with time zone and other media obligations, but we will have this man right here, the skyscraper, Stefan Struve. He'll be taking on Jared Rosol in the first fight of the night in the heavyweight division. Looking at Stefan Struve, he is 10-5 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Antonio Nogueira at UFC 190. 16 of his 26 victories are by submission. Looking at his counterpart, the Big Show, Jared Rosol, 5-1 in the UFC. His last victory went over Tim Johnson at Fight Night Nashville, and of his 13 career victories, 6 are by decision. Two things I want to look for in this fight. One, will Rosol look to go into the guard of Stefan Struve? Many heavyweights have gone there and have gotten submitted. And Struve, good striker, yes, but I think he's even more dangerous with his submissions. And two will be the conditioning. I think Struve is the better conditioned fighter. And if this thing goes into the third round, I think Struve has a good chance of getting a finish and will be the fresher fighter as well. And three, the finishing ability. As I mentioned, Rosol doesn't have too many finishes. He really grinds on his opponent, uses his size and wrestling skill to get a lot of victories, whereas Struve, several occasions, goes for broke, even if that's a detriment to his thing. I mean, the Mark Hunt fight, I thought he had won, but kept on going for submissions instead of pounding the guy, and Mark Hunt ends up coming out with the victory, with that huge knockout, breaking his jaw. And so that's the thing. Struve is a guy that's going for the finish, and I think that willing to kind of throw caution to the wind sometimes makes him a wild card, and that could end up being a difference against a guy who plays it pretty conservative.
Yeah, I think Rosol's really in trouble in this fight. I'm just going to be honest about it. I think if he's on the feet, I think Struve can control it enough and get the better of him. And Struve, yeah, I don't see Rosol having that one punch. I mean, every heavyweight does, and he could do it, but I don't see him posing too much trouble for Struve. Put Struve on his back, I think he's even in more trouble, like you're saying. I don't think you want to take Struve to the ground. I think he's going to submit you or at least pose a lot of those threats from his back nonstop. So I really think anywhere this fight goes, Struve would be the heavy favorite.
The next fight of the evening, I think I'm maybe most excited about this fight right here, Billy. Uriah Hall against Robert Whittaker in the middleweight division. I'm just super excited for this fight. Looking at Uriah Hall, he is now 5-3 in the UFC. His last fight, huge win over Gegard Mousasi back in Japan at Fight Night 65. And Fight Night 75, and 8 of his 12 career victories are by knockout. Looking at his opponent, Whittaker, 5-2 in the UFC, 2-0 since moving to middleweight. Very big victory in his last fight. That was at Fight Night 65 as he knocked out Brad Tavares. That was in Australia as well. And 7 of his 14 career victories are by knockouts. Both these guys are knockout machines. Both these guys throw hard. They throw quick. And I just think somehow one of these two is just going to catch somebody with something, and they're going to go down. And for Robert Whittaker, I think it's, a bigger win for him, especially with Hall already kind of having that huge win against Mousasi. But if you look at Hall, if he gets another win against another top 15 opponent, he really, I think, boosts himself up the rings. And already being dynamic, I think fans like him. He had the Ultimate Fighter. He's the guy that I think instantly gets a big fight, with a win here. And especially, again, doing it on short notice, once again, helping out the UFC and beating a guy in his hometown, or not hometown, but home country there in Australia. I think this fight's just going to be excellent.
Man, you know what? I think I might agree with you looking back, only because, well, there's one fight I'm more excited for, but I'll get into that. This fight is such a good matchup stylistically, and like, I think it's more questions for me on what Hall shows up. You never know what you're going to get out of him, but man, if he shows up the way he has been, you look at the Musashi fight, he wins this fight, he's right in like the top 5 fights, I think, for sure. Whitaker, he has so much to gain here, and like, I don't even know where to go. This fight's gonna be so exciting, striking. I'm already trying to think of my pick in my head, and it's really like a coin flip. Like either
to me, the big difference and the one key area I see in this fight is Hall being a little taller, maybe a little longer. How Robert Whitaker will deal with that, and obviously Whitaker being a guy that used to fight at 170. You know, if the clinching becomes an issue, will the strength and power that Hall brings to the table, is that going to be an issue?
Yeah.
Because that may be something he's never faced before here now at 185 pounds as opposed to 170.
Because I think we're going to see more of a straight kickboxing match, and I think they're both technically sound, really good strikers, but I think Hall sort of has the advantage in he's more, I don't want to say explosive, but with his techniques, they're more different.
And I would say the kicks are more there with
Yeah.
him, whereas Whitaker is definitely more of a power puncher than a power kicker.
Yeah, and so, man, I can't wait for that fight. That's an exciting fight.
We move to another big fight in the heavyweight division, big literally and figuratively, as Mark Hunt will take on Antonio Bigfoot Silva, with both guys tipping the scales near 260 pounds. This is a rematch of their fight about over almost 2 years ago in the most exciting draw you will ever see in your life that happened back in 2013 in Australia, UFC Fight Night 33. Since that point, Mark Hunt has gone 1-2, losing his last 2 fights, both getting knocked out pretty brutally to Fabricio Verdum and Stipe Miocic. And in much similar fashion, Antonio Bigfoot Silva has kind of gone downhill as well since the epic draw, as he has also only gone 1-2, and he got knocked out viciously twice in the first round by Arlovski and Mir. However, did come back and knock out Palele in his last fight. Looking at this one, they're both dudes that, you know, just kind of swing big for the fences, so to speak. Bigfoot doesn't really use his submission background as much as he could or should, and also notoriously a slow starter, a guy that, you know, is a guy you just got to put away early, because if you let him hang around, it always seems like he then comes with a knockout. But I think in this fight, I think Mark Hunt will start fast, and I think he's going to come after him early. And if he doesn't, Mark Hunt proved that he has no conditioning. So I honestly think if this goes midway through the second, I would say I would favor Bigfoot Silva. Bigfoot Silva can hang around for about 8 minutes. I think he can get the knockout. But if Hunt can land some big shots early, I think he can get the victory in his home country there.
Yeah, I'm kind of just going to give it away here how I feel, because I really think if you look at their last 3 fights, even though they both haven't been that good, I think Mark Hunt has had the way harder and better fights. If you look at his fights, the champion Verdum gets knocked out, but he dropped Verdum twice in that fight, had a great fight. The Stipe fight, he kind of, the conditioning was 0 and he's got controlled, but Bigfoot really hasn't looked there at all, even in his win over Solo Palele.
Like I said, it's, again, slow start.
And
Palele didn't get on him early enough.
It wasn't even like Palele kind of just gave up. Like, it was even in a win, I think it was a bad fight for him. And I think even Mark Hunt's last win was actually a lot more impressive. I mean, knocking out Roy Nelson, how hard is that? And yeah, I think this will be a quick one for Hunt, and I think Silva will go down early.
The next fight of the evening, the co-main event for the UFC Women's Strawweight title, Joanna Jędrzejczyk puts her title on the line for the second time against Canada's Valerie Letourneau. Looking at the challenger, Letourneau 3-0 in the UFC. Her last fight was a win over Marina Moroz at Fight Night 74, and 4 of her 8 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Jędrzejczyk, 5 of her 10 career victories are by decision, undefeated in her career and undefeated in the UFC at 4-0. And in her last fight, defended the title successfully for the first time against Jessica Penne. That was back in Berlin at Fight Night 69. If Letourneau can get this thing up close in the clinch, use her size against a girl that's fought at much higher weight classes, maybe she can wear on Jędrzejczyk, maybe tire her out for the later rounds. But if she cannot get in close and has to attack from distance or range, I just don't see how she deals with the kickboxing skills of Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And ask Carla Esparza if she's harder to take down than you think, and I don't even think Letourneau has the wrestling skills that Esparza does. So if it stays standing, I think much like Penny, I think Letourneau can hold her own for a little bit. It would just be a matter of time until Jacek's accumulation of strikes would get the knockout. So unless Letourneau can impose her will early, I mean super early, I think Joanna Champion remains just that.
I don't think, I'm just going to be real as it gets here, just the UFC real as it gets. I don't think there's a girl in this weight class that can come close to Jacek right now. I honestly think there's not a single girl that can grapple and hold her down. And then if you want to stand with her, I don't think there's a single girl that can stand with her stand-up skills. I just don't see it. I think anywhere this fight goes, well, all right, put it this way. I don't think Letourneau is going to take her down, and she's not going to be able to strike with her, and she's going to end up getting battered just like Carla and Penne. And honestly, Joanna's probably my second or favorite fighter in the UFC right now to watch. She's so exciting. She's constantly just going for the kill nonstop. I mean, I can't say a bad thing about Joanna.
She definitely is the favorite, should be the heavy favorite, expected to win. And again, Letourneau, she has to stick to that game plan to a T. She has to get in close because it's Joanna's a girl that you can't go to your plan B and expect to beat her. So if your A game doesn't work, well, you're just
going to be a long night for you.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't even think if she gets close. I mean, Joanna was she was like a top Muay Thai person, right? So you want to get in that clinch with her. I don't know.
Let's get to that main event. Speaking of untouchable female fighters, Ronda Rousey also undefeated. She takes on another undefeated fighter in Holly Holm. Looking the challenger at home, 9-0 in her career, 2-0 in the UFC. Her last fight was a win over Marion Renault at Fight Night 71, and 6 of her 9 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Ronda Rousey, as I mentioned, undefeated in her career, 12-0, 6-0 in the UFC. All her wins are by finish, 9 submissions with 3 knockouts. She got a knockout in her last fight against Bethe Correia at UFC 190. And the question, I guess, to me is, will Rousey keep this standing or will instantly try to clinch, get the throw, and go for a submission? Because I think if she does what she did against Bethe Correia, maybe the same thing could happen, but it would happen in 34 seconds. I will say that. Now, she may still get the knockout, Billy, but Holm is technically, I think you can make a case she's arguably the most technically sound striker in the division.
The only striker I would sort of put above her maybe is Nunes.
Definitely more. I think she's more. Nunes is definitely more scary. Yeah, I think with the knockout power, because Holm, again, 6-9 victories by knockout, but she hasn't shown that in the UFC. That's the thing. She hasn't shown that in the UFC, but her kickboxing skills are definitely better than Ronda's. You can't really argue that point. To me, the whole question is what Ronda decides to do, and Holmes simply has to try to react to that. She either reacts to rushing in with punches, trying to counter that, or she reacts trying to get out of a clinch or get up off her back after being thrown. Because once Ronda clinches you, you're getting thrown. No one has been able to stop that. So to me, that's almost inevitability of that if it's a clinch, she's getting thrown. So how she can deal with getting back up. And also how she can deal with the pace. That's one, I think that's maybe even more than just simply her skill. It's just the pace Ronda puts on people. They're not expecting for that nonstop action. And so can Holm handle that pressure? Because so far in her fights, it's been a more methodical at range. It's been a little back and forth. It hasn't been anyone trying to get in her face or vice versa. It's no one Matt Browning her. You know what I mean? It's no one coming after you and throwing shots. And that's exactly what Ronda's like do.
7 Matt Browns.
And that's almost, to me, what it is just how Holm deals with the pressure, let alone skills aside, how she deals with someone just stalking her.
In ideal, that's what I think. I think Ronda has such a, I don't want to say a chip on her shoulder, but everyone's going to say, oh, she steam rushes a nobody and Bethe Correia and destroys her. And then everyone says Holly Holm's this good kickboxer and striker. I think Ronda's actually going to come out there and just make it a kickboxing match with her and say, hey, is there anything you guys think I can't do? Because that's the type of person she is. If you think, oh, she can beat me,
kind of like Will Brooks against Held. Like, yeah, you think I can't do jujitsu with this guy? I'm going to take him down.
You see John Jones do the same thing a lot. They're like, hey, he shouldn't clinch with Cormier or go to the wrestling. He's like, all right, I'm going to take Cormier down or whatever it is. He does that in all his fights. They say you don't want to box with Glover or whatever. So I think you're going to see a lot of that from Ronda. And You know what? I think it's gonna make it a good fight actually, because when you do that against Betch Correia, there's not much she can offer up. Let's be realistic. I mean, the UFC got away with one there. We believed in that fight a little bit. This fight will be different. Holly Holm has a serious fight background. She didn't just start fighting to lose, get in shape a couple years ago. I mean, she's a serious martial artist, and I think if Ronda does decide to try and just, I'm just going to strike with her like that, it's going to be a good fight. But then again, I still have that feeling at any moment, if Ronda gets uncomfortable, she's going to snap a takedown and rip her arm off.
Before we get to picks here, first, other than the Rogers Center, I should say, the first big stadium show the UFC has done, there's reportedly supposed to be close to 70,000 people there. What do you expect from the crowd come Sunday night in Australia, especially when the rowdy one walks out to the cage? Is that mass hysteria by the Australian fans?
It's going to be absolutely insane. Like, I really can't even imagine it. I think there's some pictures released sort of like almost how small the octagon looks to how big it is. Like, man, it's crazy. And I'm really like, this is one of those fights where I'm almost going to be sad to be on TV because the people there get to witness something special, just how many people are there, especially Ronda. That moment's got to be insane for her. So I'm really excited to see how it all plays out and this many people.
It is, because who would have thought that the highest number of people attending a UFC event would be headlined not just by one female fight, but by two.
And let's remember,
and it could be a gate that may take years to pass. I mean, it may be a while before, first of all, they even try a stadium show, let alone a stadium as big as this Epidot Stadium in Melbourne.
The only thing that's going to happen is Conor McGregor is going to be super butthurt that all his records just got broken, and he's going to try and one-up it. So,
right.
But unless he does it, I think, all right, put it this way. If Conor beats Aldo and takes it to a stadium show in Ireland, I think he can beat it. If Conor doesn't, I don't think this will get beaten for a long time.
Unless it's another Ronda fight in LA or something.
Exactly. That's the only way they do it, is if Ronda breaks it herself. Like, there's no other stars in the UFC. Maybe if they just do an insane stat card like UFC 200.
If GSP was still around, I think they could have done a bigger stadium in Canada.
GSP,
bigger than Rogers Center.
Hear me out. GSP said he's probably going to come back now. Let's be realistic. They make GSP Silva finally.
See, now that's intriguing because neither guy really has anything to lose.
Yeah, it's true. I don't care about that fight no more.
Actually, it'll happen when GSP's 48 and Anderson Silva's 51. That's probably when it will
in
happen.
Bellator. Could you imagine?
And it'll be in Houston, Texas, because they don't care. All right. Let's get to the picks, though. Let's get back to serious picks here. UFC 193, first fight of the evening, heavyweight division. The skyscraper, Stefan Struve against the Big Show, Jared Rosholt. Rosholt definitely has a chance. He has a very dominating, overwhelming presence. But like I said, that X factor, that caution to the win, that finishing factor of Stefan Struve. Give me the skyscraper in this one.
Yeah, 100%. I think Stefan Struve, anywhere this goes with the striking, if he gets put on his back, Rosholt's in trouble.
Middleweight division, Uriah Hall against Robert Whittaker. Oh, man, this is just going to be electrifying. I'm going with Uriah Hall. I think he has a lot of momentum now, and Robert Whittaker definitely has a chance, but I think right now Uriah Hall is on the cusp of getting a big